The next part we're going to talk about is results. And results are different than your methods section, which we talked about previously. Results are what actually happened. And you always sort of start the results again with, you've already described what kind of study you have and all those other kinds of things in the methods. So what you're going to do next is you're going to start with the results. And the results almost always start with, we attempted to get 600, we got 500. So it always starts with who you tried to get and who you did get. And that would, you divide each other one over the other, and that is a response rate. So what was your response rate? And this could be for each wave of when you did the study. Again, it would depend on how you did the study. If it was a pre and a post test, and it was a one-off, then you would report the response rate there. But if you've done it over several iterations, or if you've tried to capture people over time, you would talk about that. Now, if you're doing a chart review, you would also talk about how many charts you attempted to use and then which ones you didn't. Again, that's your response rate. Anytime you talk about a response rate, whether it's a chart review, whether it's an intervention, whether it's an educational component, what have you, you always need to sort of address why either people said the main reason they said they didn't want to take part, or how many people dropped out. So you could have sent out the survey to 600 and you got 500. Why do you think that response didn't happen? You approached 600 people, you got 500 people. What was the main reason people said that they didn't want to take part in the study? What were the main problems with, if you're doing a chart review, with those charts, and why you couldn't include them, okay? So you need to talk about that. How many you wanted, how many you got. That's the first thing you do. Then the next thing you do is you sort of talk about your sample. So how many people were in your sample? You've already talked about, but who are they? Sort of give the demographics. And again, the demographics would depend on what sample population you were reaching out to. So what were their ages, gender, race, what level of education they were, what level of nursing experience or medical experience were they, of the people who actually responded, not the people you wanted, but the people you actually have. And what that's doing is it's sort of setting the scenario of what's the sample we are actually talking about. And then from that is when you start talking about, did you find a significant relationship? Was there a significant change pre and post test? Was there a significant change with an intervention? And where did that happen? Okay, so you'd say we had a significant change, and you would say where that happened, which variables that happened, what area that happened, or you would say we didn't see a significant change. And then you would also sort of talk about, if you're doing a pre and a post test, you'd say pre we saw this, and then post we saw this, hence the significant change. You'd be very specific about the sort of responses you got, which questions you saw the biggest change in. That's the kind of thing you would do if you were administering a survey or an educational component, where you saw the biggest change. Was there significant change? Now, no change is still a change, and you still need to report the pre and the post test results. Some of you might be doing a sort of educational intervention and you're looking at how people change over time. So you would sort of report each time period, was there a change? Sometimes those numbers, and one of the things that we need to be very careful about is whenever you're saying we had 60% who said there was a difference, that 60% might be out of only 50% of the patient population. So you always, when you talk about percentages, in parentheses behind that, put the actual number that you're talking about. Because if you have 100 people and you're only talking about 50% of those people had a change, and only 25% of those people had a significant change, you've gone from 100 to about 25. And that's a whole different story. So we need to know those actual numbers behind those percentages changed. We can't just say there was a significant change. We also have to state where that was or where that wasn't. So if you're doing a survey, you would talk about specific questions, which of course are specific variables that you're looking at. Again, you have to be very much reporting this so that I can see what happened on the ground. You might see a significant change or a significant difference based on some of those things you talked about in the very beginning. Race, gender, years of experience. So again, we're going to do in statistics, we're going to cut that information a lot of different ways and see if there is any significant relationship based on those variables. And remember, a long time ago, we talked about those as control variables. So they might be alternative explanations as to why things did or didn't change. It might be people with more nursing experience didn't see as big a change as people with less nursing experience. It might be that first year year students had a bigger change than second year students. It might be that patients who had more resources, whether that's family or health insurance, or were older and had a higher level of education, saw a different change. So again, it's not sort of enough to just say, we saw a change, hey, let's go. I need to know where that was, who that was. Again, we need to really think about the results section as not sort of a everything matters, because we want to hone in on what specifically mattered. Where did we make the difference? Again, part of this is because there's going to be a lot of factors that impact that potentially, but also again because I want to see where the change happened and where the change didn't. Now, one of the things you need to keep in mind, whether it's evaluation research or educational research or even retrospective research, is we're sort of again narrowing down that framework of what impacts what, so that we can better use our resources, we can better educate our patients, we can have better healthcare outcomes by doing more purposeful, targeted interventions based on research, not just based on the way we've always done it or what we think happens, but we're actually looking at what actually happens on the ground. And again, no change is still a change. It might be we didn't have a change because people who were more experienced or older wouldn't take part in studies that were done online. Those kinds of things we would need to address in this section. But this is just the results. This is not where you sort of make a judgment or talk about them. That's another section that we will talk about later. So previously we've talked about the method section, and this is just the results section. This is where you're going to do a lot of tables, a lot of sort of pre and post test comparing two groups kind of thing. So this is where you're doing a whole lot of table making. You get a lot of feedback from me. Obviously, I help you with all of this. So we can, as a reader, understand what's happening, and that's what the purpose of tables are. But again, with tables, and anytime you do percentages or numbers, you have to put those actual numbers of the subjects you're talking about behind them, so that I know we're really talking about 50 people or 20 people or just 2 people. Again, that does indicate the validity of it, but it might be specific people that are very hard to reach where we've seen a change or where we haven't seen a change. Again, all of that we would talk about later. Right now we're just sort of saying what happened and what we found, with sort of was it significant or not based on your hypothesis or your supposition, but we're not making sort of any judgments at this point, just the results, right? Just presenting a patient with just the results. I always think about the results section as when you present a patient to a member of your team, you don't you talk about their test results, you talk about who they are, you present them sort of based on demographic information and how they presented as a patient and where they are now based on where they were before. It's very similar in the results section of your paper.